This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Hi, I'm Li Xueying, and you're listening to Asian Insider. In this episode, ST's Hong Kong correspondent Magdalene Fung looks at how Hong Kongers are trying to promote the learning and use of Cantonese in the outside world. Hello, Mag. 早晨.
Hello, Xueying.
Since we're recording this in the morning and we're going to be talking about Cantonese. So, Mag, you wrote about the growing efforts to promote the learning and use of Cantonese in places like London and Hong Kong. So I'm curious to know what made you decide to explore this topic.
Well, basically it started from Instagram. So I have a number of friends who would regularly send me this type of popular reels of things like how Hong Kongers express themselves, how Cantonese can be so brutally honest, or how to swear in Cantonese, this type of very
Do you want to
quirky
demonstrate
Cantonese language.
swearing in
Probably
Cantonese?
not on air.
Okay.
Yeah, so I realized that basically there's a lot of content on social media covering the language, and they're teaching or discussing the language in very entertaining formats through funny videos or revisiting famous Canto films or pop songs, etc. And they are actually followed by tons of people, whether in Singapore, Hong Kong, or US, including some Asian Hollywood actors and even Singapore ministers.
Right.
So that was what really started me exploring the topic. And when I looked a bit deeper, I realized that actually many of these content creators aren't even based in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Or some primarily Canto-speaking places. They have actually migrated to the UK or US or Canada, or they are of mixed heritage. So this could explain their wider appeal to a more English-speaking audience.
I see. That's interesting. I mean, is this fairly unique to Cantonese as a dialect as opposed to other kind of Chinese dialects like Hokkien or Teochew? I'm just curious to know whether maybe it's due to the fact that Hong Kongers are maybe a bit more activist in wanting to promote the use of Cantonese.
Yeah, okay, so I think it is a special thing for Cantonese compared with, say, Hokkien or Teochew. To be honest, I haven't really seen that much of this type of Hokkien content online or on social media. But, well, I think for Hong Kongers, they definitely, first of all, they are more geographically mobile, I think. And the other thing is also they are very passionate about language as a part of their identity.
Right.
So I think the fact that they have migrated to other countries where they are forced to use other languages full-time probably give them the extra motivation to assert or want to maintain their unique identity in their foreign environment.
Right. Yeah. So there was a statistic that you cited in your article, which I was quite surprised by, that Cantonese ranked actually number 20 among the world's most spoken languages in 2023 and is now spoken by more than 85 million people around the world. Do you have a sense of whether this number has actually grown over the years?
Okay, has the number of Cantonese language speakers actually grown? I'm thinking maybe not so much, but what is certain is that, like I mentioned earlier, these speakers have fanned out a lot more over the years around the world and to other continents beyond Asia. So especially in recent years where Hong Kong has seen this big exodus of locals and expats in the hundreds of thousands. So it's basically a sign of language moving and spreading, Cantonese speakers bringing their language overseas, forming their own communities there, and are now actively using and sharing the language with those around them and beyond their Cantonese-speaking community. And I think this is evidenced by one of my newsmakers, CC Pang. So she runs a Cantonese playgroup in central London. So she was telling me that after 2020 was the year when Britain offered Hong Kongers a route towards citizenship after Beijing imposed the national security law in Hong Kong. And so many Hong Kongers took that up and went to the UK. So Cici was telling me that this influx of new Hong Kong immigrants to the UK over the past few years has actually greatly widened the pool and quality of Cantonese teachers that she can now tap on. So where in the past she had to hire those who taught the language quite informally, so like they might have been just admin assistants in Hong Kong, then they went over there and they are teaching Cantonese. But now she has this ready set of CVs of formally trained Cantonese language teachers all at her disposal.
I see. So there's a bit of the supply factor going on at this point.
Yes, which also allows her to basically improve the quality of, I guess, her Cantonese language programs in London. Yeah.
Right. So that does take me to the next question, which is, how are these people now teaching Cantonese in a way that is different from how it was done previously?
Okay, so to talk about how it is done now, first I have to explain how it used to be, or traditionally. Basically, children in Cantonese-speaking households, they tend to start school already knowing the spoken language since it's their mother tongue. And then when they reach schooling age in school, they are taught to read and write it formally in the traditional Chinese script. So the way that written Cantonese is used in school and textbooks and newspapers in Hong Kong is just quite different from the terms used in the colloquial language, that is the spoken language. So maybe to give you an analogy, for an English speaker, it's like you learn to speak normal English like this at home, but when you go to school, you have to write it all out in formal old English. For example, normally you might say to your friend, "You're great, I love you." But then, in school, your teacher will tell you, "Oh, you have to write and spell that out as 'How great thou art, ich loveth thee,'" something like that. So
Right, okay.
So for foreign language learners trying to pick up Canto, this can be very confusing. So if they went to school to learn formal Cantonese, they wouldn't even be able to speak colloquial Cantonese normally. It would just be like speaking in Shakespearean English, for example. So the modern way of teaching Cantonese now, especially for foreign language learners, is moving increasingly towards using this system called Yutping. So Yutping is the standardized romanized version of Cantonese. So it's like Hanyu Pinyin for Mandarin, or it's like transliterated Thai or romanized Korean. Basically, you just spell out the word with the English alphabet. And this is a game changer for Cantonese because now it becomes so much easier for everyone else to learn to communicate in Cantonese, whether you are sending a WhatsApp message to book a table at a restaurant or what. As long as you know your ABCs, you can kind of guess from the sound how to spell it out. So basically, it just makes Cantonese more accessible to those learning it as a foreign language.
Right. But this is basically informal learning, right? Among people who are just picking up from Instagram accounts, or perhaps these are enrichment centers, but not so much in the school system.
Yes, but they are increasingly trying to reach out to the schools to promote this Yutping system. It's just like, imagine when we picked up Chinese, if they didn't introduce us to the Hanyu Pinyin system since we were young, then it would be harder for us because we would first need to learn to write the strokes.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you have a sense of how receptive the formal system in Hong Kong is to maybe changing the way it's teaching Cantonese as a result of these grassroots efforts to reform the way Cantonese is being taught?
Well, according to some of the academics that I've spoken to, it does seem to be a bit of an uphill climb for them, especially for the older folks. But I think for younger ones, basically what they're doing is they go to the schools and they provide courses for them. And I think as long as you kind of introduce it to younger kids and it's on your phone, there are these tools on your phone, so they tend to be more receptive to that. It's just the older generation maybe.
Right, okay. So for instance, you were talking about one of the people you spoke to had actually invented an app that allows for you to type Cantonese characters using this Yutpin system rather than having to know the strokes of the characters themselves, right? So if more people are actually starting to learn via their phones, even before they go to school, there's, I guess, one way that the system is going to spread among Hong Kongers.
Definitely.
Right. So just now you mentioned something interesting. You said language is identity. And I think you're right. I think a big part of what it means to be a Hong Konger is to speak Cantonese, and not just Cantonese, but Hong Kong Cantonese with all its idioms and slang. And in my time living in Hong Kong as well, I found that people there are so passionate about Cantonese as a marker of who they are. So this, I assume, is one reason for why there is this surge in efforts among the people themselves to want to spread the use of Cantonese. And I think this is perhaps coming at a time when many Hong Kongers are feeling somewhat unmoored by the political turbulence of the past decade.
Yeah, I think so. So basically, I think a lot of factors contribute to, how they feel about their language. Of course, they take a lot of pride in it because it's tied to their core identity. And this becomes all the more important when they are abroad or when they are no longer within their Hong Kong community. So they want to try to assert their identity in this foreign environment. They want to create content or they want to shape the work that they do around promoting the use of their mother tongue. That's one. Another factor I think is it's quite interesting. So there has been a lot of talk or fear around the belief that Cantonese is a dying language, with people apparently abandoning it for languages with higher utility or economic value like English or Mandarin.
Is that true though?
Yeah, so what I'm just going to tell you is that what I've seen so far doesn't really seem to be the case, to be honest. So at least in Hong Kong, from what I've observed, while, Hong Kong people have progressively become more multilingual, they are still, continually producing their own literature. So this is in the form of new films, new Canto pop music, new slang words. And yeah, so for young and old, these movies and songs are still quite popular and widely watched and listened to. So, if you ask me whether Cantonese is dying, it's hard for me to say I can see it dying, but maybe the fear of losing the language is precisely the reason that, Hong Kongers are holding so dearly to it and investing so much of their energies into promoting its use and fighting for what they see as their survival. And all these efforts, come together to contribute to raising or improving the global accessibility of the language for, people around the world.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the language itself has new slang, new slogans, new idioms that are added to it, I think it's a testament to the fact that it's very much an alive language, constantly being used and worked on in the everyday lives in Hong Kong. I think that every time we go to Hong Kong, it feels like the language itself is evolving and changing. What you hear on the streets change as well.
Yeah, and that is also what if you speak to, Cantonese speakers in Malaysia or Singapore, they will tell you that on the streets when they go to Hong Kong, you don't really understand, especially when the young people speak or when they speak in a modern context in the office environment. It's just new terms popping up, every now and then.
Do you know what the latest fad is when it comes to speaking Cantonese among younger Hong Kongers?
Well, to be honest, I can't think of one off the cuff that is not crude and playable on air. Yeah.
Okay, we can talk about that later off the air. Okay,
Yeah.
so I know that you focus on Hong Kongers for the purpose of this article, right? But of course, as we know, Cantonese is spoken not just by Hong Kongers, but by other Chinese on the mainland as well, mainly from Guangdong, but also, of course, outside that, the Macanese as well. So do you have a sense of whether the mainland Chinese are also embarking on this similar journey of wanting to fight for the survival and spread of the language?
My sense is not really. So it seems to me that people in Guangdong on mainland China have actually been faster to drop the Cantonese language, and perhaps being a part of mainland China may have accelerated that. So when you visit places in the Greater Bay Area like Shenzhen, Guangzhou, or Zhuhai, the working language there is Mandarin. And even if you make it clear that you can speak and understand Cantonese, the service staff, when they attend to you, their go-to language for interacting with you will still be Mandarin.
But is that because they're migrants? They're not native to the area?
Yeah, it could be because there are many migrants, but also locals who the go-to language is just Mandarin from my observations. And in fact, there may even be some kind of connotation that insisting on speaking in Cantonese may give, so it might be a reflection of your political stance.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure how widespread this is, but people have suggested it. And so perhaps this has contributed to quickening the fall in the use of language in Guangdong province. Of course, I'm not saying that everybody is in a hurry to drop Cantonese in Guangdong just for that reason, but I mean, the decline in the use of the language has been many years coming. So like there was a study in around 2020 or 2021 which found that most local primary and secondary school going children in Guangzhou didn't even know how to pronounce very basic words in Cantonese. So simple words like pencil, for example, they would give you some mangled Mandarin sounding version of it. Like in Mandarin, pencil is called 铅笔. In Cantonese, it would be 云bat. But the kids would guess that it's called 亲bat. Because it sounds more similar to
Yes.
to Mandarin. Yeah, and this type of inaccurate Cantonese pronunciation will occur only if Mandarin is your first language. And I know that very well because I make the same mistakes all the time. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting to know. And Matt, I think we differ on this, but my sense is that you are a proficient Cantonese speaker yourself, although you deny that. But if you had to use these tools that are now being promoted by Hong Kongers, whether in Hong Kong or outside of Hong Kong, what is your assessment of how good they are? What have you picked up from these new tools out there?
Okay, these new tools, right? Earlier we talked about one of them. It's called Type Duck. Or in Cantonese, you call it Type Duck, meaning one can type. So this is a newish app. It was launched only in the last 2 to 3 years. It's available on Apple and Android devices. It's free, and basically it installs a special Cantonese input keyboard on your phone that you can use to type in Cantonese. Essentially, you type in based on the sounds that you hear. You type the approximate romanized spelling of the words. Then it will give you the Chinese characters for those words, as well as their translations in English. And you can also pick translations in a whole range of other languages like Indonesian or Hindi or Urdu. So basically, that is one tool that has been very helpful.
Okay, I'm downloading that right now.
You should. And it has helped a lot of, I would say, the ethnic minority people living in Hong Kong to basically assess written Cantonese to, say message other people for delivery and stuff. And then another widely available tool is just on everybody's phone. You can use the microphone to speak a Cantonese phrase. Of course, you need to install the language app on your phone, as in the generic language app. And then you use the mic to speak whatever Cantonese you want, and it comes out in Chinese characters. That has also been very helpful. And one final tool I have to share is Google Translate, which only about 2 months ago finally added Cantonese to its list of translated languages. So now you can do real-time sound translation or translate text in other languages, even Mandarin, into colloquial Cantonese. So not just the formal written form, but they will do the colloquial form for you.
Do you know how that came about? Was there some lobbying done by Cantonese speakers for Google to include that?
I think actually long ago they have wanted it, and this time round I think Google in one shot it introduced another many languages at one go. It might be like I don't know how many, 200 or something. But yeah, so basically all along people have asked for that or wanted it, hoped for it, especially the expat community in Hong Kong. But I think Google's response for many years was that it's just very difficult because of the differences, I guess, in the traditional written formal form.
Yes.
And the different particles used in the spoken one.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but now that they've done it, and I've personally used it, and whether Google Translate or Type Duck or just the mic, they have all been just so helpful because they allow any language learner of any proficiency level to communicate in day-to-day scenarios without first already being a master at the language. And I actually use these tools fairly regularly, and they definitely make my life easier.
Okay.
Of course, I can tell you some downsides also. Basically, they make an otherwise multilingual person lazy to use their own brains to do the hard work of processing and translating the language for themselves. Yeah, but of course, if you're like me, you're using it for work, then these instant translation or input tools, they really help to free up some time for you to apply your brain juice elsewhere.
True. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think that our listeners will be very interested to sort of pick up some of these tools that you have outlined. Thank you again for coming. Ngoy. Did I get that correct?
Thank you for the yes, Ngoy. And thank you for the very interesting conversation.
Okay, thanks. Well, that's a wrap for Asian Insider. If you would like to read our column, we have a link in our podcast show notes. This episode was produced and edited by Faisal Sani. Thanks for listening.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.